You've seen Blade Runner, the rain, the neon, the replicants questioning their existence, but did you know the director and star fought over whether Deckard was even human? Or that the most iconic speech in sci-fi history was rewritten the night before filming? How about the actor who showed up to his first meeting wearing pink satin pants and nearly got fired before shooting a single frame? From sets built upside down to doves that refused to fly, this legendary film was held together by chaos, improvisation, and a director who refused to compromise. Ready to dive into the secrets? Here are 21 wild facts about Blade Runner that'll change how you see this masterpiece forever. Number 1. Is Deckard a replicant? Even the filmmakers can't agree. Let's start with the question that's haunted Blade Runner fans for over 40 years. Is Rick Deckard a replicant? You'd think the people who made the movie would have a definitive answer. They don't. Director Ridley Scott says yes, absolutely, 100%. He even added that strange unicorn dream sequence specifically to hint that Deckard's memories are implanted, artificial, just like the other replicants he's hunting. For Scott, it's not up for debate. Deckard is a replicant, and that's the whole point. But here's where it gets messy. Harrison Ford, the guy actually playing Deckard, completely disagreed. Ford has always maintained he played the character as human. He didn't even know about Scott's replicant theory while they were filming. When he finally found out, he wasn't happy. The two clashed on set over it, and neither one backed down. To this day, decades later, Ford and Scott still don't see eye to eye on this fundamental question about their own film. And honestly, that creative tension works. It adds to the ambiguity. Blade Runner was never about giving easy answers. It wants you wondering, questioning, debating, just like Deckard himself does throughout the entire story. Number 2. The title came from a completely different book. Blade Runner wasn't always going to be called Blade Runner. The original source material was Philip K. Dick's novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, a title that works beautifully for literature but sounds awkward and confusing for a movie marquee. The studio knew it. Too long, too strange, too philosophical for mass audiences expecting action and thrills. So they went hunting for something catchier, something that would pop on a poster. That's when they stumbled across a totally unrelated book called The Blade Runner by Alan E. Nourse. It had absolutely nothing to do with androids, dystopian futures, or detective work. The book was about smuggling medical supplies in a dark future where healthcare had collapsed. But the title sounded cool. It had punch. It had mystery. So the studio bought the rights to use the name, scrapped everything else about Nourse's story, and slapped Blade Runner onto their android hunting cop thriller. The ironic twist? The words Blade Runner never appear in Dick's original novel. Not once. It's purely a marketing invention borrowed from another writer's completely different vision. Sometimes the perfect title is just about finding the right vibe, even if it has nothing to do with your actual story. Number 3. Rutger Hauer pranked Ridley Scott and nearly lost the role. Ridley Scott cast Rutger Hauer as Roy Batty without ever meeting him face-to-face. Scott had watched Hauer's performances in Turkish Delight, Katie Tipple, and Soldier of Orange, Dutch films that showcased Hauer's intensity and range. Scott was so impressed he made the call immediately. Hauer was Roy Batty. Done. But when it came time for their first meeting, Hauer decided to have a little fun. He showed up wearing massive green sunglasses, bright pink satin pants, and a white sweater with a giant fox printed on the front. His hair was styled exactly how he thought Roy should look. It was outrageous, deliberate, a test. According to production executive Katherine Haber, when Ridley Scott laid eyes on Hauer, he literally turned white. For a brief, terrifying moment, Scott thought he'd made a catastrophic mistake. This wasn't the menacing, philosophical android he'd envisioned. This was a circus act. Hauer held the bit just long enough to make Scott sweat before breaking character and revealing the prank. They bonded over lunch, discussing French sci-fi comics like Metal Hurlant. Scott realized Hauer understood the character deeply and wasn't afraid to bring bold ideas to the table. The joke worked, but it could have easily backfired. One wrong move, and one of cinema's greatest villain performances might never have happened. Number 4. The Tears in Rain speech was rewritten the night before. One of the most iconic moments in all of science fiction cinema almost didn't exist. Rutger Hauer's haunting Tears in Rain monologue, delivered as Roy Batty dies on a rainy rooftop, is frequently cited as one of the greatest speeches ever filmed. But it wasn't in the script, at least not in the form audiences remember. The original dialogue, written by screenwriter David Peoples, was much longer. It was technical, filled with sci-fi jargon about off-world adventures and exotic locations. Hauer read it and thought it was terrible. He called it opera talk, overly theatrical and disconnected from the emotional core of the moment. So the night before filming, Hauer took matters into his own hands. He grabbed a pen and started cutting. He trimmed the speech down to its essentials, keeping only 2 poetic lines he felt belonged to Roy's character. Then he added his own flourish. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Simple, devastating, human. He didn't tell Ridley Scott about the changes beforehand. He just showed up on set and delivered his version. When the cameras stopped rolling, crew members were in tears. Some applauded. Scott immediately knew they'd captured something special. That unscripted edition turned a standard villain death into a meditation on mortality, memory, and what it means to have lived at all. And Hauer created it in a single night with a pen and his instincts. Number 5. The dove didn't want to fly. Right after Roy Batty delivers his Tears in Rain speech, there's a quiet, haunting moment where he releases a white dove into the stormy sky. It looks perfect on screen, poetic and symbolic, as if the bird represents Roy's soul finally being set free. But that moment wasn't in the script. Rutger Hauer brought the dove to set himself. He thought the image would add weight to Roy's death, a visual metaphor for release and transcendence. Ridley Scott agreed and worked it into the scene. But there was one problem. It was pouring rain during filming, and the dove really didn't feel like flying. When Hauer opened his hand to release it, the bird just sat there, soaked and confused. For several awkward seconds, it refused to move. Not exactly the dramatic ascension Hauer had imagined. Eventually, the bird took off, but the hesitation, that slow, uncertain lift into the rain, made the moment feel more real, more fragile. It added an unexpected vulnerability to Roy's final breath. Sometimes the best cinematic moments come from things not going according to plan. The dove's reluctance became part of the magic. Number 6. 7 different versions of Blade Runner exist. Most movies have a theatrical cut and maybe a director's cut if you're lucky. Blade Runner has 7. 7 distinct versions have been shown to audiences over the years. There's the original work print, the US theatrical cut, the international version, a San Diego sneak preview, the director's cut from 1992, the final cut from 2007, and even a TV edit. Why so many? Because Ridley Scott and the studio could not agree on what the movie should be. When test audiences first saw Blade Runner, they were confused. The studio panicked and demanded changes. They added a voiceover narration to explain the plot. They tacked on a happy ending where Deckard and Rachel drive through green countryside while Deckard's voice assures us Rachel can live a full human lifespan. Scott hated both additions but didn't have final cut approval. Over the years, fans kept demanding a version closer to Scott's original vision. That led to the director's cut in '92, which removed the voiceover and the happy ending, and finally the final cut in 2007. That version is the only one where Scott had complete creative control. It's the one he considers definitive, but the existence of 7 cuts means there's no single Blade Runner. There are 7 parallel visions of the same story, each subtly different. Number 7. Harrison Ford refused to wear a hat. Harrison Ford had just wrapped Raiders of the Lost Ark, where he wore a fedora in almost every single scene. By the time Blade Runner came around, he was done with hats. Completely over them. He didn't want Ridley Scott covering up his face again, hiding his expressions under brims and shadows. So Ford took preemptive action. Right before filming started, he went to a barber and got a modern, stylish haircut. Not a period cut. Not something that could be easily hidden. A contemporary look that wouldn't allow Scott to justify putting a hat on him. It was a small act of rebellion, but it worked. Scott couldn't cover that haircut without it looking ridiculous. Ford kept his face visible throughout the film, letting his expressions carry the weight of Deckard's exhaustion and moral conflict. Sometimes the battles actors fight behind the scenes are about the smallest details, but those details matter. Ford knew his face was his instrument. He wasn't about to let it get buried under a costume twice in a row. Number 8. The set was built upside down on the first day. Ridley Scott is known for his obsessive attention to visual detail. So when he showed up on the first day of filming and saw the massive columns that had been constructed for one of the interior scenes, he was horrified. They were upside down. The intricate, sophisticated designs were on the floor, and the plain, unfinished parts were facing up toward where the camera would be shooting. The set designer had made a practical decision. Since the camera would never see the ceiling, why waste the detailed work up there? Put the beautiful parts where people might actually notice them. Scott was furious. He demanded the entire set be reconstructed. When the crew told him it would take several days, he insisted they do it in 7 hours. They did. Scott also demanded the scene be lit with flickering lights, as if reflected from water. The crew pointed out they were indoors. Where would the water be? Scott didn't care. It didn't have to make logical sense. It had to look right, feel right. That obsessive, sometimes unreasonable perfectionism defined the entire production. It drove people crazy. It cost time and money, but it's also why Blade Runner looks like no other film. Number 9. They filmed almost everything at night in constant rain. Blade Runner's production schedule was brutal. Virtually every scene was shot at night. Crew call was late afternoon. Wrap was 6 in the morning, for weeks on end, without a break. But it gets worse. To sell the film's perpetual rain aesthetic, the cast and crew stood outside under industrial sprinklers for the entire shoot. Every single night. Soaked, cold, exhausted. Equipment started malfunctioning from water damage. Mildew crept across props and costumes. Wardrobe had to be constantly replaced because nothing ever fully dried. Actors' fingers pruned. Tempers flared. It was miserable. Crew members later described it as one of the most physically punishing shoots they'd ever experienced. But that discomfort bled into the performances. Everyone on screen looks tired, worn down, trapped in a world that never stops raining. That wasn't just acting. That was real exhaustion, real frustration. The production's grueling conditions became part of the film's DNA, adding authenticity you can't fake. Number 10. Sean Young stayed in character between takes. To really sell the idea that Rachel was a replicant who believed she was human, Sean Young went deep into the role. Maybe too deep. On set, she didn't just perform when cameras rolled. She stayed in character between takes. Crew members noticed her standing completely still, barely blinking, speaking in a flat, emotionless monotone even during casual conversations. She moved carefully, deliberately, like someone consciously controlling every gesture. It unsettled people. No one quite knew if Young was committed to intense method acting or just messing with everyone. She also studied old Hollywood icons like Katharine Hepburn to give Rachel that vintage film noir elegance. The combination created a performance that felt eerie, elegant, and just slightly wrong. Exactly what a replicant hiding in plain sight should feel like. That uncanny valley quality, where something looks almost human but not quite, came from Young's willingness to blur the lines between performance and reality. It made people uncomfortable, but discomfort was the point. Number 11. Harrison Ford really hurt Sean Young and mooned her to apologize. During the scene in Deckard's apartment where he stops Rachel from leaving, there's a moment where Deckard roughly pushes Rachel against a wall. Watch Sean Young's face closely. The pain and shock you see aren't entirely acted. Harrison Ford really hurt her, and it happened more than once during takes. Years later, Young talked about the experience. She said Ford's physicality in that scene was genuinely rough, crossing the line from performance into actual discomfort. But here's the strange part. According to Young, Ford made it okay. Whenever he hurt her during a take, he'd turn around afterward and drop his pants, mooning her to make her laugh. It was his weird way of apologizing and breaking the tension. Inappropriate? Probably. Effective at keeping Young from getting upset? Apparently yes. It's one of those behind-the-scenes anecdotes that sounds bizarre but reveals the strange chemistry and dysfunction that sometimes exists on film sets. The scene works because there's real tension, real discomfort. Some of that came from Ford not pulling his punches. Number 12. Daryl Hannah slipped on the curb and kept going. In the scene where Daryl Hannah's character Pris runs away from William Sanderson outside his home, she sprints toward a parked van and slams into it, shattering a window. It looks intense and chaotic, but if you watch carefully, you can see something else happen. As she collides with the van, Hannah slips off the wet curb. It's a genuine accident. She lost her footing on the rain-slicked pavement, but here's the thing, nobody realized it at the time. Hannah kept going, staying in character, continuing the scene. Ridley Scott didn't yell cut. The cameras kept rolling. That stumble made it into the final film. It adds to the chaos and desperation of the moment, making Pris feel more frantic and uncoordinated. Sometimes the best moments in movies are the ones that weren't supposed to happen. Hannah's professionalism, her ability to stay in the scene even when things went wrong, elevated what could have been a ruined take into something more raw and real. Number 13. Joanna Cassidy's snake was her own pet. When Deckard interviews Zora at the nightclub, she has a massive python draped around her neck. It's in striking image, unsettling and exotic. That snake wasn't a movie prop. It was Joanna Cassidy's personal pet, a python she'd named Darling. That's why Cassidy looked so comfortable handling it. She wasn't acting calm around a dangerous animal. She was genuinely relaxed because the snake was hers. It trusted her. She trusted it. Bringing your own snake to a major Hollywood production is a bold move, but it paid off. The ease and confidence Cassidy shows in that scene sells Zora's character immediately. This is someone unbothered by things that would terrify most people. Someone who operates outside normal boundaries. The snake wasn't just a visual flourish. It was characterization, and it only worked because the actress and the animal had a real relationship. Number 14. The happy ending. Used footage from The Shining. In the original theatrical cut of Blade Runner, the film ends with Deckard and Rachel driving through lush green countryside. It's jarring. After 2 hours of rain-soaked urban decay, suddenly we're watching trees and sunlight. That tonal shift wasn't an accident. The studio demanded a happy ending. Scott didn't have footage of forests or nature. He'd shot everything in Los Angeles, indoors or at night. So they improvised. The footage you see in that original ending, outtakes from Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, specifically the aerial shots of Jack driving up to the Overlook Hotel. Warner Brothers owned both films, so they just grabbed unused Shining footage and repurposed it for Blade Runner's happy ending. It's one of cinema's strangest recycling jobs. When Scott released the director's cut in '92, he removed that entire sequence. No more forests, no more happy ending, just ambiguity and rain. Number 15. Philip K. Dick. Hated the first script, loved the revision. Philip K. Dick, the author whose novel inspired Blade Runner, followed the film's development closely. When he read Hampton Fancher's original screenplay, he was furious. He called himself angry and disgusted. He felt the script had stripped away all the subtlety and meaning from his book, reducing it to a shallow fight between androids and a bounty hunter. Dick was convinced the movie would be a disaster, a bastardization of his work. Then, David Peoples came in and rewrote the screenplay. When Dick read that version, his entire opinion changed. He couldn't believe what he was reading. The story had been rejuvenated in fundamental ways. Peoples had found ways to make scenes work that Dick didn't think were filmable. It reinforced the novel rather than replacing it. Dick was thrilled. Sadly, he passed away before the film was completed. He never saw the finished product, but he died knowing the script had evolved into something he respected. That meant everything. Number 16. Dick refused $400,000 for a novelization. Warner Brothers offered Philip K. Dick $400,000 to write an official Blade Runner novelization. That was serious money, especially for a science fiction writer in the early '80s. But there was a catch. The studio wanted him to suppress his original novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, in favor of a commercialized novelization based on the film's screenplay. They wanted it aimed at 12-year-olds. Simplified, dumbed down. A movie tie-in designed to sell tickets, not literature. Dick refused. He wasn't interested in appealing to kids or writing a cheapo novelization that would damage his artistic integrity. He fought to have his original novel reissued instead, even though it cost the studio money. They were furious. But Dick held firm on principle. Do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep was eventually reprinted as a tie-in, with the Blade Runner poster as the cover but the original title in parentheses below. Dick won that battle. He protected his work, and in doing so, he ensured audiences would discover the novel that inspired the film, not a watered-down retelling. Number 17. Blade Runner bombed because of E.T. When Blade Runner hit theaters in June 1982, it flopped hard. Critics were divided. Some praised its visuals and themes. Others complained about slow pacing and lack of action. But the real killer wasn't the reviews. It was timing. Blade Runner was released on the exact same day as another science fiction film, John Carpenter's The Thing. Both movies bombed at the box office. Both featured dark, bleak themes and ambiguous endings. Both would later become cult classics, but neither stood a chance against the juggernaut that was E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Steven Spielberg's heartwarming alien friendship story had opened weeks earlier and become a cultural phenomenon. It was on its way to becoming the highest-grossing film of all time. Audiences in '82 wanted to feel good. They wanted optimism. Blade Runner and The Thing offered existential dread, violence, and questions without answers. Word of mouth spread that both films were depressing. Families chose E.T. instead. It took years, VHS releases, and director's cuts for Blade Runner to find its audience. But when it did, it became one of the most influential science fiction films ever made. Number 18. The soundtrack took 12 years to release. Officially, Vangelis's score for Blade Runner is haunting, atmospheric, and inseparable from the film's identity. The moody synthesizers, the futuristic soundscapes, they define the movie's emotional core. But despite how iconic the music became, fans couldn't buy it. There was no official soundtrack album. Not at release. Not for years afterward. Warner Brothers and Vangelis couldn't agree on terms. The composer wanted creative control. The studio wanted something more commercial, so nothing happened. Fans were desperate. They started making their own bootleg versions, ripping audio directly from VHS tapes or stitching together tracks from other Vangelis albums to recreate the sound. These homemade bootlegs became legendary. Some fans still insist those grainy, imperfect versions captured the film's atmosphere better than the official release ever did. They had bits of dialogue, ambient street noise, this raw, emotional quality that felt more authentic. It wasn't until 1994, 12 years after the film's release, that an official Vangelis Blade Runner album finally came out. A 3-disc version followed in 2007. But for many hardcore fans, those early bootlegs remain the definitive way to experience the music. Number 19. Blade Runner influenced everything. Blade Runner didn't just make a great movie. It created a visual language that would define science fiction for decades. The dark cityscapes, perpetual rain, neon signs in foreign languages, towering corporate pyramids, that entire cyberpunk aesthetic traces directly back to Ridley Scott's vision. Video games like Deus Ex and Cyberpunk 2077 are spiritual descendants. Anime like Ghost in the Shell and Akira drew heavily from Blade Runner's imagery. Director Katsuhiro Otomo openly acknowledged the film as a major inspiration. Tabletop games like Shadowrun built entire worlds around Blade Runner's fusion of high-tech and urban decay. Films like The Matrix, Dark City, and countless others borrowed its visual DNA. Even if someone's never seen Blade Runner, they've almost certainly seen something influenced by it. The film set the template for what the future should look like in popular culture. That's a level of influence few movies ever achieve. Blade Runner didn't just tell a story, it redesigned how we imagine tomorrow. Number 20. Producers threatened to take control. Every single night, Ridley Scott's perfectionism drove the production budget higher and higher. The shoot dragged on. Scenes required dozens of takes. The financial backers got nervous. Really nervous. They started showing up on set almost every night, standing behind Scott while he directed, telling him each take was good enough, pushing him to move faster, threatening to pull the plug. Scott refused to budge. He insisted on finishing the film at his own pace, his own way. The tension reached a breaking point. The final scene of the movie was shot just hours before the producers were scheduled to take creative control away from Scott entirely. If he'd gone even slightly over schedule, someone else would have finished Blade Runner. That pressure, that constant fight to maintain his vision, nearly broke him. But it also forced Scott to protect every frame. He knew he was running out of time. That urgency is visible in the film's intensity. Blade Runner feels like a movie fighting for its life, because behind the scenes, it was. Number 21. Rutger Hauer kissed Joe Turkel without warning. During the scene where Roy Batty confronts his creator Tyrell in the massive pyramid bedroom, Rutger Hauer did something completely unscripted. He leaned in and kissed Joe Turkel full on the lips. Turkel, who played Tyrell, had no idea it was coming. It wasn't in the script. They hadn't rehearsed it. Hauer just went for it in the moment, testing boundaries, adding unpredictability to Roy's final confrontation with his god. Turkel, ever the professional, rolled with it. He didn't break character. In fact, he gave Hauer a surprise of his own. When Hauer kissed him, Turkel slipped in his tongue. Two actors improvising, pushing each other, creating a moment of bizarre intimacy right before brutal violence. That unplanned kiss added layers to Roy's character. Rage, need, longing, all tangled together. It made the murder that follows even more disturbing. Sometimes the best performances come from actors willing to take risks and surprise each other. Bonus fact: Elon Musk's Cybertruck was inspired by Blade Runner. When Elon Musk unveiled the Tesla Cybertruck in November 2019, he didn't just show off a futuristic vehicle. He leaned into the science fiction vibe completely. Musk tweeted that the truck's design was directly influenced by Blade Runner. And the timing? The Cybertruck's reveal happened in November 2019, the exact month and year the original Blade Runner is set. That wasn't coincidence. It was completely intentional. From the angular armored design to the cold stainless steel finish, the Cybertruck looks like it drove straight out of Ridley Scott's dystopian Los Angeles. Musk wanted something that looked cinematic, not just functional. Something from a movie, not a showroom. Love it or hate it, the truck's design sparked massive conversation, and its roots in Blade Runner are impossible to miss. It's just another way the 1982 classic continues shaping how we imagine the future even 40 years later. Blade Runner isn't just a movie, it's a miracle. A film held together by arguments, accidents, and impossible demands. Director and star couldn't agree on the main character. The most famous speech was rewritten overnight. Sets were built wrong. Doves refused to fly. 7 different versions exist because nobody could agree what the story should be. But somehow through chaos and compromise and one director's refusal to settle, it became a masterpiece. A film that defined cyberpunk, influenced generations, and still sparks debates decades later. If you learned something new or just love diving into the messy reality behind great art, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment. Which fact shocked you most? The pink pants? The 12-year soundtrack delay? Or maybe you've got your own theory about whether Deckard's a replicant? Let us know. Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering. Just like Roy Batty watching C-beams glitter in the dark. All those moments don't have to be lost. Not if we remember them.